There's a certain kind of person who walks into a room and something shifts. You felt it before. Energy moves, conversations get sharper, and opportunities seem to surface out of nowhere. Most people assume it's charisma, or charm, or the gift of gab. Some people would call it being a natural. But after years in investment banking, sitting across the table from founders, executives, advisors, and other people call when something hard needs to happen, I can tell you that that explanation is wrong. What you're watching when one of those people enters a room isn't charisma. It's something much harder to build and much more important to understand. I'm writing a book about it right now. It's called The Modern Day Rainmaker. And in the first chapter, I make an argument I think most people will resist at first. Being a rainmaker has very little to do with sales and almost everything to do with who you become. So today I want to talk about what's actually happening with people who consistently win in business and in life. Because once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. And you'll start to recognize who's really creating value in your world and who's just performing. Let's be honest for a second. When most people hear the word rainmaker, they picture a specific archetype: the smooth talker, the closer, the person with the Rolodex. The one who can say, as the old saying goes, sell ice to an Eskimo. That picture is not just incomplete, it's flat out wrong. I've worked with people who fit that description perfectly. They're confident, they're charismatic, they're fluent in business. And honestly, many of them are not rainmakers. They're performers. There's a huge difference. A performer takes from the room. A rainmaker brings something to it. The performer is trying to close. The rainmaker is trying to create movement. And in my experience, the actual rainmakers, the ones whose names gets whispered in boardrooms, the one founders fight to have on their cap table, the ones who get the call when something is on fire, are not the loudest people in the room. They're usually the most disciplined, the most trustworthy, the most consistent, the most service-oriented. They don't sell, they serve. Now, let me be clear about something. People hear service and they assume it's a tactic, a strategy, a way of softening you up before they ask. It's not. For real rainmakers, the service is the identity. It's not what they do to get business, it's who they are. The business follows because people can feel the difference between someone who wants something from them and someone who actually wants something for them. You don't fake that, you become that. Here's a line from chapter 1 of the book that I keep coming back to. A modern day rainmaker is not just someone who generates revenue. It's someone who creates movement. Movement in businesses, movement in relationships, movement in rooms, movement in their own life. Now let me unpack that. In a business, a rainmaker is the person who breaks the stalemate. The deal was stuck. The numbers weren't lining up. Egos were in the way. And somehow, after they enter the conversation, things start moving again. Not because they pushed, because they reframed. They calmed. They added something the room was missing. In a relationship, a rainmaker is a person who makes other people feel possibility. You leave the conversation more clear, more alive, more committed to your own work. Not because they gave you a pep talk, because they treated you like someone capable of more, and you started to believe it. In a room, a rainmaker changes the temperature. They walk in carrying their own energy. They don't borrow it from someone else just to make themselves feel more comfortable. The room adjusts to them, not the other way around. And in their own life, this is the one that most people miss. A rainmaker is constantly creating movement in themselves. They're not static. They are reactive. They're not coasting on who they used to be. They're continuously growing. They're reading. They're training, they're paying attention. In a world where so many people are distracted, reactive, cynical, transactional, and exhausted, that combination has become incredibly rare. And that's why rainmakers are valuable. Not because they're good at sales, because they're rare humans. Now let me get personal for a minute. I didn't grow up in this world. I cleaned floors. I made coffee. I worked an assembly line. I was a janitor and a barista before I was ever a banker. Some people hear that story and assume there was some big moment of inspiration, some big lightning bolt, some lucky break. Honestly, it wasn't that. What changed everything for me was a phrase. 8 words I started repeating internally and out loud to anyone further down the road than I was. Teach me the rules of the game and I'll win it. That's the whole shift. Not, I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. Not, I'll learn the hard way. Not, I'll prove I belong by force. But show me how this actually works and I'll do the work. I wasn't the smartest person in the room, and I'm still not. But I became obsessed with how successful people think, how they communicate, how they build trust, how they carry themselves under pressure, how they handle adversity, how they treat the person bringing them the coffee versus the person bringing them the deal. I watched everything. I asked questions other people were too proud to ask. I took notes nobody saw me take. And here's what I learned. The people who win consistently are not winning because of some secret most people don't know. They're winning because they took the rules seriously when other people didn't. And guess what? Success leaves clues. I've said that line 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more. The people you admire are not magic. They're not lucky. They are disciplined in ways people refuse to be. They show up when they don't feel like it. They keep their word when no one is checking. They follow up when they said they would. They prepare more than the situation requires. They listen more than they talk. These are not tactics. These are habits, and habits become identity. And identity is what other people feel when you walk into the room. So here's where this all lands. Most people who want to be rainmakers are studying the wrong thing. They're looking for sales techniques, outreach scripts, negotiation tactics, the hack, the angle, the shortcut. But the real answer is much harder and much simpler. You become a rainmaker by becoming the kind of person whose presence creates value everywhere they go. That doesn't happen because you read a book. It doesn't happen because you took a course. It happens because you decided quietly on a Tuesday with nobody watching that you are going to live differently, show up differently, prepare differently, and treat people differently. You hold yourself to a higher standard that nobody else is enforcing. And the older I get, the more I believe in one thing. The people who create the most opportunities in life are usually the people who bring the most value to other people's lives first. Not as a strategy, but as a way of being. That philosophy changed my entire career. It changed my relationships, and honestly, it changed the quality of my life. Because once you stop trying to get something out of every room, the rooms start opening in ways you never knew expected. I'll close with this. I don't think becoming a rainmaker is just about making money. I think it's about becoming the kind of person whose presence creates value everywhere they go. That's the version of this work that's worth doing. Not because it pays better, although it does, but because it shapes the kind of human you become along the way. The kind of leader, the kind of partner, the kind of parent, the kind of friend. That's a game worth learning. Over the coming months, I'll be sharing more from this book. Lessons, scenes from my own road, things I've learned from people who walked it before me. If that's the kind of content you want in your week, subscribe and stick around. I make videos for people who are serious about building something that matters, not people looking for shortcuts. Let's continue to build something meaningful together.